Hello, I'm Mark Johnson. The video you are about to see is a discussion on Idaho's religious exemption laws that allow parents to deny their children medical care based on the parents' religious beliefs. Now, since these laws have been enacted, hundreds of children from Idaho faith healing communities have died. Experts say that 90% of those children would have lived had they received modern medical attention. Changing these exemption laws will not affect immunization legislation or requirements in any way. Let's begin with former Idaho Chief Justice and former Attorney General Jim Jones, who coincidentally is teaching his very first law class. The man has done virtually everything you can do in this state regarding law, including holding the highest justice position. But today he becomes a law professor for the very first time, rookie professor, I might add. Ladies and gentlemen, Jim Jones.
As Mark said, there's been a statute on the books since before statehood that requires parents to give their kids medical care, food, shelter, clothing, and if they don't do it, prior to statehood it was a misdemeanor, but the legislature later made it a felony offense with up to 15 years in prison to fail to carry out that responsibility. There is another statute, it's called Injury to Children, that basically has the same requirement. In 1972, interestingly enough, the heavy hand of the federal government came down on the state of Idaho, and the Fed said, you have to change your statute. Your statute says that anybody who violates the law is subject to severe penalties, but we're going to require you, state of Idaho, to include an exemption for faith healing. That's the only reason it's in the statute is in 1972, the federal government says, either you do it or you're going to lose federal funds. So the state dutifully did it. And here's what they wrote into the statute. The practice of a parent or guardian who chooses for his child treatment by prayer or spiritual means alone shall not for that reason alone be construed to have violated duty of care to the child. So if you denied the child food, and said, well, it was because of my faith, then you could starve your kid. If your kid needed medical care and you said, well, it's because of my faith that I didn't provide it, then you might get out of the statute that requires you to go to the pen. Some of the people who think that this would have some influence on vaccines or vaccinations, and as Mark said, that's not in the picture. Prior to 1972, there was no instance where anybody can show that people were prosecuted for failing to provide vaccinations or preventive care. The statute, as it's drafted, applies to what we would call diagnostic care. That is, if the child had a broken leg or if there was some problem that encountered during the birthing process. Those are the kinds of things. Existing illnesses or injuries are what the parents are required to provide medical care to take care of. It doesn't have anything to do with preventive care. That is taking pills or something or vaccinations to prevent some kind of occurrence or some kind of an illness to happen. So, I mean, that's just not in the picture. There's a provision of the Idaho Constitution that does have a direct effect on this, and it says that you cannot give religious preference to any religious organization. It is my opinion that the faith healing exemption is in violation of Article 1, Section 4 of the Idaho Constitution.
We're also very fortunate to have with us former First Lady here in Idaho, Patricia Kempthorne, who founded a local family nonprofit. And as I mentioned to her, and she agreed with me before today's discussion began, this topic hits the center of her nonprofit's missions bullseye. Ladies and gentlemen, Patricia Kempthorne.
If we have a statute that indeed does not protect the children of the state, but makes them more vulnerable, then that just doesn't seem right to me. I've dedicated my work life and my life's work to promoting and maintaining a sense of family consciousness at home, in the workplace, and in the community. I truly believe family is the core of our society, and without that strong bond, it is much more difficult for children to develop, learn, and grow, and really realize their full potential. I believe and work daily to promote the optimal early development and learning and health of children by supporting and engaging the parents and the caregivers. If you check, you will find that I've almost literally, as Mark pointed out, quoted the mission statement to my foundation. We live in community. We are each a part of the fabric of that community and are each stronger because we bring strengths together to allow our state to thrive. As a society, we have determined that there are certain things that should always be sacred. The well-being of our children is number one. With our differing opinions, we need robust conversation, education on why and how we got here, awareness of the consequences of those decisions. We can't be afraid of these conversations because the lives of children are at stake. I have tried to understand why we are allowing a statute to exist in our state that is, if not unconstitutional, as you heard today, may just be unfathomable if it puts any child in danger. We all own this. These kids can't speak for themselves. Now, I am a person of faith, and I believe wholeheartedly in prayer for guidance, for healing, and well-being. I enjoy the freedoms in this country to believe as I choose, as you do. For me, the Bible says that faith, hope, and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. With that knowledge and direction, I must stand up for the children of our state and ask us all to consider removing the language in our law that does not reflect the quality of that love that we have for our children. Thank you for being here.
And she is joining us via Zoom to share her story that some of you may have seen portions of on a 2018 documentary that A&E did called The No Greater Law. Linda Martin, can you hear me?
I was born and raised in the Idaho Followers of Christ. I am a survivor of the Followers of Christ. When I was 16, I left my family and the Followers to escape the abuse. I was born in Boise and lived in Idaho for over 45 years. In 2013, I was part of a news report about Idaho's religious shield laws and the faith-healing deaths of children in the Followers of Christ. Since 2013, I have been asking the people of Idaho and the Idaho legislature to repeal or amend the religious shield laws to protect the children. The children who died were deprived of any form of medical care. Many of these children could have survived had they received basic medical care. I know of adults who made the choice to treat their children with prayer alone, watched as their children died, and then when facing their own illness or injuries, they went after medical treatment for themselves. Why is Idaho still protecting these parents? Prayer alone is not medical care. It is child abuse and neglect. For over 60 years, I have watched helplessly as my childhood friends, children in my immediate family, and children of church members die painful and needless deaths. Will there be another 60 to 100 years of death, disability, and pain for children born into Idaho's faith-healing families? Every year, Idaho's religious shield laws remain in the books. More children are at risk of dying. There are already over 200 children buried in Canyon County's Peaceful Valley Cemetery alone. How many would be alive today had they received medical care? How many more deaths will it take? All children have the right to life after birth. Let's make this the year that we change these laws and save children from dying. Thank you.
Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue, who has had a long history with Followers of Christ members in his community in Canyon County. He too was prominently featured in that A&E documentary, No Greater Law, on the subject focused in his jurisdiction. Sheriff?
From a law enforcement perspective, what I'm faced with under the mandates of my office and public safety, and first and foremost, I too am a person of faith. I have my religious beliefs, and I hope all people have a religious belief, whatever that may be. So this isn't about my religion against their religion or your religion. That should be set aside. And actually, Patricia, you did a good job of saying, it's about the children, and it is about the children. From the law enforcement perspective, and of course, we're not at the level that Jim Jones, of course, at the judiciary side. But when I get a call, just a basic call, or my office gets a basic call on neglect of children or an injury to a child or an abuse of a child, we are obligated, and rightfully so, mandated to investigate. And we're happy to do so and let the facts speak for themselves. The problem is when we get a call, if we get a call over the years on these types of cases, and I will clarify that our relationship with the folks from the Followers of Christ has improved, in my opinion, over the last 5 or 6 years. When we do get a call, it's very difficult. Let's just, for an example, Mark, I'll give you an example of a child, an infant that has died maybe at birth or maybe has died within a week or two and this is just an example. But for us, and it doesn't matter the age of the person that has died, that is a scene that we are obligated to investigate. And so we want to make sure that we protect not only the victim, if there is a victim, there's obviously a death, but we want to protect those who are associated with that victim as well, because they have rights. And my job is to protect those rights. However, what we've seen over the years is, and it's a patchwork of cases, because of their religious beliefs, the body may have been moved, the body may have been unclothed and reclothed. So for us, the scene has been altered. And so it's difficult from a law enforcement perspective that to do our job, we need to have all the facts of the case. And there are times when it's difficult for us to get people to come forward to explain what happened. We're not there to be judge and jury. We're there to gather the facts and review, and then, if necessary, produce a report and submit that report to the prosecutor for review. A lot of these cases that we see, that becomes very difficult from our perspective. Now, conversely, the uniformity and the equality under the law, it should be equal across the board. We should not treat one group of people differently than we treat this group of people or this larger group of people. It should be uniform across the board. That's how, under the rule of law, if the society that we live in, that we choose to live in, we have the rule of law. And so, in my opinion, my professional opinion, that we all must follow under the same guidelines. And this, as Justice Jones has explained, creates a caveat that we don't do that. And so there is a protection for a specific class of individuals.
Also with us today via Zoom, John Foote. He is the former prosecuting attorney in Clackamas County outside of Portland, also a fellow recent retiree. John's most famous cases in his many years as prosecutor involved prosecuting members of the Followers of Christ Church after the deaths of several children. And John, we appreciate you joining us. You have the floor and the screen. John Foote.
Thank you, Mark. It's an honor to be here with all of you. I was a religion major in college. My sister is a retired minister in Minnesota. My mother, before she passed away, was a retired minister back east. My grandparents were missionaries overseas. I was raised in a church. I don't think faith healing and medicine contradict each other, but not one to the exclusion of another. You know, when a child's going to die in the church, everyone goes to the house to pray. That was the practice. I assume that's the practice generally. They have a number of religious things they do. They know the child is dying. And after the child dies, they call medical examiner's office, and medical examiner's office calls law enforcement. You go to the house, there are 100 people standing around. Everyone says there were no symptoms. That happened in every single case. And they all seem sincere. Until we did the autopsy and brought in medical professionals to say, there is no way this would have happened with no symptoms. No way. First of all, these cases are far more tragic than statistics because they are completely preventable. The doctors told us that within a minute before that child died, if a doctor had taken control of that child would have lived. There was more of an effort to appear virtuous to God than there was to help your kids. That you would sacrifice your children to prove your faith. Think about that. Faith healing is fine. I have no problem with faith healing. But prohibiting medicine can be a crime. And under most laws in this country, it is.
Also with us via Zoom is longtime Idaho State Representative John Gannon, who was actually the one who drafted the bill in 2018 that would have made faith healing a criminal offense in the state, as it is in nearly every state in the country. That bill did not make it very far down the road. Representative John Gannon on Zoom.
Well, thanks, Mark. And just to correct what you said there, it was not making faith healing a crime. It was basically you have to combine your faith healing with medical care, with medical consultation. But Idaho Code 18401, I think, really illustrates the problem. And what it deals with is the abandonment or non-support of wife or children, desertion, and non-support of children or spouse. This statute illustrates the issue and the problem that I think the panel's been focusing on. If you look at subsection 2, it deals with the child, and it requires that the parent furnish necessary food, clothing, shelter, or medical attendance for his or her child or children. But it has an exception that if faith healing alone is used, that's not to be construed as a violation of the duty of care to the child. Okay. But in subsection 3, it talks about supporting the spouse. And if the spouse is not supported by the other spouse, if one spouse willfully abandons and leaves the spouse in a destitute condition, or who refuses or neglects to provide such spouse with necessary food, clothing, shelter, or medical attendance, then there can be liability under this criminal liability under the statute. So the question immediately arises, well, why isn't there a faith healing defense for the adult spouse? Why is it just applicable to the children? And I think that focuses in on the whole issue that is being discussed today. Shouldn't the children receive the same kind of care that you would be expected to give to your spouse. If your spouse was seriously ill and needed to have some kind of care in order to possibly alleviate that illness, this statute requires that the other spouse do that. You're required by law to do that, but you're not required by law to the same extent for treating your child. I would hope that this statute can be amended by this legislature or in the very near future.
I would like to open up this panel discussion to talk about some of the questions that members of the audience have submitted. And going through many of them, for obvious reasons, are asking the panelists about parents' rights and the rights that parents have in raising their children. This question, what do you think gives you the right to decide if faith healing should not be used to treat a child that chooses it and their family chooses it, including vaccines? Kind of along the same lines, how do you reconcile the Supreme Court rule in 2000 that states the custody, care, and nurture of the child resides first in the parents, with this proposition to take parental rights away from good parents, dealing with parental rights?
When we talk about, and John John Foote, the prosecutor, talked about not mistaking the faith with the law. And for me, at least, it goes back to the uniformity and the equality under the law. It's not about trying to impose criminal penalties because you have a particular faith, but to rather recognize that we live in a society of laws and that we, outside of this exemption, we impose those laws, or we hold people accountable, we investigate those cases for neglect and the well-being of those individuals, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult. And for here, more specifically to the child. And so how do we ignore that? For me, it's hard to try to find a way to ignore for this parent versus that parent. When this parent says, well, and we can say parental right. Most of us here are parents. We want to raise our children the way we want to raise our children, but we also live under the rule of law in a society that reflects that. And so if we carve out that your child can perish because of not addressing a basic medical need, but this person over here who doesn't claim that religious status, we're going to hold them accountable under criminal investigation, it's just not fair. And to me, the law should be fair to everyone. It should be, again, equal across the board. There should be uniformity. These are good people who are well-intended. They are parents, and they care deeply about their children and their family. I have obviously talked to many over the years as an investigator and as the sheriff, and that's not an issue at all. But that, for me, it goes back to what's good for one must be good for all, rather than what it is today.
But you have to protect your kids from preventable things, and that medicine can address, medicine that is available, medicine that is applied in almost every other case. And we didn't have one real controversial case about the fact that the death was preventable.
So being someone who grew up in a family where I understand trauma, and I understand what trauma can mean to you later on in life. I understand that without the some help from the community, support of the community, not the community telling you what to do, but them supporting you, the family gets to make that choice. So you take this away, so that there is no, what's the word I want now? The statute, so that isn't, you aren't protected by faith healing. Right. That goes away. You can still believe in faith healing, and I want you to, and pray for them. But you have to make that choice then of what happens to that child. Yes, it is you as the parent and the family's responsibility, but as a person in the community who can see it from a child's perspective too, we also have that responsibility. If we see a child in imminent danger, shouldn't we say something? And then then it goes into all the systems that you're talking about. I'm not saying taking that responsibility away from the parents. I'm saying you have that responsibility. And what are you going to do to save the life of the child?
My 2-year-old nephew had spina bifida, and he died of untreated pneumonia when he was 2 years old. I called Health and Welfare and asked if there was some way that somebody could come in and help this child before he died. They told me because of the faith healing statute, the parents were not doing anything wrong, and so they could not intervene. That's one reason we need to get rid of this law. And I have talked to first responders that have gone out to accidents, and there's been an injured child, and the parents were there and have told them that they did not believe in medicine. And so they had to walk away and leave that child and could not put a child in an ambulance and take him to a hospital.
Can I add one thing to the answer? And that is, especially when you look at 18401, it seems to boil down to this: what's good for the parents, what's good for the spouses, should be good for the kids too. And that's we've had the term medical attendance applicable to the spouse for as long as this statute syndicates since at least 1972. So I don't think that is an issue that should be of big concern, because all we would be doing is saying what's good for the parents, it's good for the kids, and you'd have the same standard, the same rules, same law.
What gives the state the right to determine how I parent and how I live my life in this free Idaho? What gives the state the right to do this? I'll open that up for the panel.
I can answer that just a little bit. What gives the parent the right to choose a treatment for a child or non-treatment if that causes permanent disability or death? What right does a parent have to seek medical treatment for themselves and then deny their child the same treatment? What gives the parent the right to treat one child with insulin and let 3 other children die? Shouldn't this be equal for all children? You know, the parents do have the right to raise their children as they see fit, but every right has boundaries, and that boundary is crossed when in the exercise of religion, it causes permanent disability, death, or abuse to another person, especially a child. Thank you.
We are trying to get the legislature to change or repeal the religious exemption laws so that all Idaho children have the opportunity to enjoy a happy, healthy life, and you can help. For more information on how to save the children or to view this panel discussion in its entirety, simply go to protectidahokids.org. Thank you for watching.